What happens when one of the greatest actors of our generation sits down for what should be a simple interview and it turns into an absolute explosion that nobody saw coming? The tension in the studio was palpable from the very first question, and what unfolded next left everyone in complete shock. Before we dive into this incredible moment, make sure you hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below telling us what you think about what went down here, because trust me, you're going to have opinions. So Anthony Hopkins walks onto the set, and right away you can sense something is different. There's an energy about him, a certain edge that wasn't there in his previous interviews. Joy Behar starts off seemingly friendly, welcoming him to the show, talking about his legendary career, his iconic roles, the usual pleasantries. Hopkins is nodding, giving short responses, polite but reserved. You can tell he's not really engaging the way guests usually do. There's something brewing beneath the surface. Then Joy pivots. She starts talking about actors and their responsibility to society, about using platforms for activism, about speaking out on political issues. She's building up to something, you can feel it. Hopkins is listening, his expression becoming more focused, more intense. She mentions other actors who've been vocal about causes, who've taken stands, and then she looks directly at him. "You've been relatively quiet over the years," she says, leaning forward slightly. "Some might say you've stayed in your lane, focused on the craft. But don't you think at a certain point, with your level of influence, there's an obligation to speak up about what's happening in the world?" The silence that follows is heavy. Hopkins doesn't respond immediately. He's looking at her with those piercing eyes, the kind of look that has intimidated countless actors on screen. When he finally speaks, his voice is measured, calm, but there's steel in it. "An obligation," he repeats, as if tasting the word. "You think I have an obligation?" Joy nods, seeming confident in her question. "Well, yes, I mean, when you have millions of people who admire you, who look up to you, surely you could use that platform to make a difference, to guide people toward what's right." Hopkins shifts in his seat, and you can see something change in his demeanor. "And you believe you know what's right," he says, not as a question but as a statement. "You believe that my purpose, my obligation as you call it, is to tell people what to think." Joy starts to respond, but Hopkins continues, his voice gaining momentum. "I've spent 50 years perfecting my craft, 50 years studying human nature, diving into the depths of characters, exploring what makes people tick, what drives them, what destroys them. And in all that time, you know what I've learned? That the moment you believe you have all the answers, the moment you think you know what's right for everyone else, that's when you become dangerous." The studio audience is dead silent now. You could hear a pin drop. Joy's smile has faded slightly, and she's clearly not expecting this direction. "I don't think wanting to make the world better makes someone dangerous," she counters, trying to regain control of the conversation. "Making the world better," Hopkins says, almost to himself. "Everyone thinks they're making the world better. Every dictator, every tyrant, every person who's ever tried to control others, they all believed they were making the world better. They all thought they had the moral authority to tell others how to live, what to believe, what to say." Joy's face tightens. "That's quite a leap, Anthony. I'm talking about using your voice for good, not tyranny. And who decides what good is?" Hopkins shoots back, leaning forward now. "You? The media? A panel of people who live in bubbles, completely disconnected from how most people actually live their lives. You want me to use my platform, my influence, to push an agenda, any agenda, and you call that good?" The energy in the room has completely shifted. This isn't a friendly chat anymore. This is something else entirely. Joy tries to redirect. "I think you're misunderstanding what I'm saying." "No," Hopkins interrupts, and there's force behind that single word. "I understand perfectly what you're saying. You're saying that my worth as a human being, my value to society, isn't in the work I've dedicated my life to, isn't in the art I've created, but in whether or not I parrot the correct opinions, whether I fall in line with what you and people like you have decided is the right way to think." Joy's expression hardens. "People like me? And what exactly does that mean?" Hopkins doesn't back down. "People who believe they have a monopoly on truth. People who think that, because they have a microphone and a camera, they're somehow qualified to be the moral arbiters for everyone else. You sit here day after day, telling your audience what to think about everything from politics to parenting. And you've convinced yourself that you're performing some kind of public service. I give people information, Joy says, her voice rising slightly. I give them perspectives they might not otherwise hear. You give them your perspective, Hopkins corrects, and you dress it up as objective truth. There's a difference. The atmosphere is electric now. Joy's co-hosts are exchanging glances, unsure whether to jump in or let this play out. Joy herself is visibly flustered, but she's not backing down. I've been doing this for decades, she says firmly. I think I've earned the right to have opinions and share them. Having opinions is one thing, Hopkins responds, his voice steady but intense. Demanding that others weaponize their careers to spread those opinions is something else entirely. You don't want me to have a voice. You want me to be your megaphone. There's a profound difference. Joy laughs, but it's not a comfortable laugh. It's defensive. You're being dramatic, which I suppose makes sense given your profession. Hopkins tilts his head slightly, a gesture that somehow manages to be both curious and condescending. There it is, he says quietly. When you can't counter the argument, you dismiss the person making it. You reduce me to my profession, imply that I'm performing, that this isn't genuine. It's a tactic and it's beneath you. I'm not trying to dismiss you, Joy insists, but her body language says otherwise. She's shifted back in her chair, her arms crossed. I'm trying to have a conversation. No, Hopkins says, shaking his head slowly. You're trying to win. You invited me here thinking I'd be another guest who'd nod along, share some anecdotes about working with other famous people, maybe plug a project, and leave. Instead, I'm challenging you, and you don't know what to do with that. One of the co-hosts tries to interject, attempting to lighten the mood with a joke about method actors, but Hopkins doesn't even glance in her direction. His focus remains locked on Joy. The co-host's voice trails off awkwardly. Joy takes a breath, clearly trying to reset. Look, Anthony, all I'm saying is that we live in challenging times. People are struggling. They're looking for guidance, for leadership. When someone like you, someone with your talent and recognition, chooses to remain silent on important issues, it can feel like indifference. Important issues, Hopkins repeats. As defined by whom? As determined by what standard? You see, this is the problem. You've created this hierarchy where certain topics are deemed important and others aren't, where certain viewpoints are acceptable and others are beyond the pale. And anyone who doesn't participate in your particular version of discourse is labeled as indifferent or complicit or worse. Are you saying nothing matters then? Joy challenges. That we should all just focus on our own little worlds and ignore everything else? Hopkins leans back, studying her. I'm saying that art, real art, transcends politics. It transcends the petty tribalism that you and your colleagues traffic in daily. When I play a character, when I inhabit a role, I'm not thinking about left or right, conservative or liberal. I'm thinking about truth, human truth, the kind that resonates across cultures, across generations, across all the artificial divides that people like you profit from maintaining. Joy's face flushes. People like me profit from divides? That's rich coming from someone who's made millions pretending to be other people. Ah, Hopkins says, and there's something almost triumphant in his tone. Now we're getting somewhere. You resent me. You resent what I do, what I've accomplished, because it exists outside your sphere of influence. You can't control it, can't shape it to serve your narrative, and that bothers you. I don't resent you, Joy snaps, her composure cracking. I'm asking you legitimate questions that, frankly, someone in your position should be able to answer without turning it into some philosophical lecture about the nature of art. They're not legitimate questions, Hopkins counters, his voice rising slightly for the first time. They're loaded accusations disguised as questions. You're not interested in my perspective. You're interested in getting me to either agree with you or look foolish for disagreeing. It's a game, and I'm not playing. The studio audience is completely transfixed. Some are nodding along with Hopkins, others look shocked by his intensity. The cameras are capturing every moment of this unraveling. Joy tries another approach, her voice taking on a patronizing tone. You know, Anthony, I think maybe you've spent so much time in your own head, in these characters, that you've lost touch with reality. Real people are dealing with real problems. Hopkins stares at her for a long moment, and when he speaks, his voice is quiet but cuts through the tension like a blade. Lost touch with reality? I've played kings and killers, saints and monsters. I've explored every facet of the human condition, pushed myself into psychological spaces that would break most people. And you think I've lost touch with reality because I won't reduce complex human existence to your simplistic political talking points? That's not what I said, Joy protests, but Hopkins continues. You live in a world where everything is a soundbite, where nuance is sacrificed for clicks and ratings, where genuine discourse has been replaced by performative outrage. And you have the audacity to suggest that I'm the one disconnected from reality? You don't know the first thing about reality. You know your version of it, the one that fits neatly into your 42-minute show format, complete with commercial breaks. Joy's jaw tightens visibly. You can see she's reached her limit. You know what, Anthony? I think you're hiding behind intellectualism to avoid taking any responsibility for the influence you have. It's cowardice dressed up as principle. The word hangs in the air. Cowardice. The studio goes even quieter if that's possible. Hopkins doesn't react immediately, but something shifts in his eyes. When he speaks, his voice is dangerously calm. Cowardice, he says slowly, deliberately. You think it's cowardice to refuse to be a puppet? You think it takes courage to repeat the same talking points as everyone else in your industry, to pile on to whatever the outrage of the week happens to be, to virtue signal for applause. That's not courage, Joy. That's conformity. And conformity has never, in the history of humanity, been the mark of bravery. Joy leans forward aggressively. I stand up for what I believe in every single day. I face criticism. I face backlash. I put myself out there. What do? You hide in your mansion and pretend the world doesn't exist. Hopkins laughs, but it's a cold sound, devoid of humor. You face criticism from people who already disagree with you, and you're praised endlessly by people who think exactly like you do. You've built an echo chamber and called it courage. The real test of character isn't preaching to the choir. It's maintaining integrity when everyone is screaming at you to compromise it. And your integrity is staying silent? Joy challenges. Your integrity is doing nothing while the world burns? The world has always been burning, Hopkins responds, his voice gaining power. It was burning when I was born, it's burning now, and it will be burning long after we're both gone. The difference is, I don't have the arrogance to believe that my celebrity opinions will somehow extinguish those flames. You do. You genuinely believe that you and your colleagues are important, that your pronouncements matter, that you're making a difference. You're not. You're entertainment. We both are. The only difference is I'm honest about it. Joy's face is red now, her voice rising. Entertainment? I inform people. I educate people. What I do matters. To your ratings, perhaps, Hopkins says. To your advertisers. But to the single mother working 3 jobs? To the farmer trying to keep his land? To the veteran struggling with demons you couldn't begin to comprehend? Your show is background noise at best, propaganda at worst. You're not a journalist. You're not an educator. You're a performer, just like me, except I don't pretend my performance is saving anyone. One of the co-hosts tries to cut in, saying they should take a break, but Joy waves her off angrily. No, let's continue this. I want to understand something, Anthony. If you think what we do doesn't matter, if you think celebrity voices are meaningless, why did you agree to come on this show? Why are you here? Hopkins smiles, and it's not a pleasant expression. Because I knew this would happen. I knew you'd push. I knew you'd try to corner me into either agreeing with you or being made to look like a villain. And I wanted to show people what really happens when someone refuses to play along with your game. I wanted them to see how quickly the mask drops, how fast the supposed tolerance and open-mindedness disappears when someone dares to think differently. Joy stands up suddenly, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. The audience gasps. You came here to ambush me? On my own show? Hopkins remains seated, completely calm. I came here to have an honest conversation. You're the one who's melting down because that conversation isn't going the way you scripted it in your head. I am not melting down, Joy says, but her raised voice and aggressive posture suggest otherwise. I'm responding to your condescension, your arrogance, your complete dismissal of anyone who actually tries to make a difference in this world. Sit down, Joy, Hopkins says, and there's something almost hypnotic in his tone, the same commanding presence he brings to his most powerful roles. Sit down and listen for once instead of talking. The audacity of it stuns her. For a moment she just stands there, and you can see the internal struggle playing out on her face. Then slowly she sits back down, though her posture remains rigid and defensive. Hopkins continues, his voice measured but firm. You want to make a difference? Then start by acknowledging that you don't have all the answers. Start by entertaining the possibility that people who disagree with you aren't evil or stupid or ignorant. Start by recognizing that your platform comes with responsibility. Yes, but that responsibility is to truth, not to an agenda. And you think you represent truth? Joy asks, her voice tight. I represent nothing but myself, Hopkins responds. I don't claim to speak for anyone else. I don't pretend my experiences are universal. I don't demand that others see the world through my eyes. That's the difference between us. You believe your truth is the truth. I know that truth is far more complicated than any of us can fully grasp. Joy shakes her head, looking frustrated and exhausted. You're twisting everything I say. You're making me out to be some kind of tyrant when all I've done is suggest that people with influence should use it responsibly. And there it is again, Hopkins says, pouncing on the word. Responsibly. According to whose definition? Yours, the networks? The mob on social media? You see, this is the trap. Responsibility becomes code for conformity. It becomes a weapon to bludgeon people into silence or compliance. Joy takes a deep breath, clearly trying to compose herself. When she speaks again, her voice is strained but more controlled. I think we have fundamentally different views on what it means to be a public figure in modern society. Obviously, Hopkins agrees. You see it as a position of authority. I see it as an accident of circumstance. You think fame confers wisdom. I know it doesn't. You believe the loudest voice in the room should guide the conversation. I believe the loudest voice is usually compensating for lack of substance. That's insulting, Joy says flatly. It's observation, Hopkins counters. And if you find it insulting, perhaps that says more about you than it does about me. The co-hosts are completely silent now, seemingly afraid to intervene. The producers must be having a field day with this content, or possibly having heart attacks. It's hard to tell. Joy tries one more time, her voice taking on a pleading quality. Anthony, help me understand then. What do you think people in our positions should do? Just stay quiet? Just ignore everything happening around us? Hopkins considers this for a moment, and when he responds, his tone softens slightly, though the intensity remains. I think we should do our jobs. I think we should do them well, with integrity, without using them as vehicles for something else. When I take on a role, I give it everything I have. I don't use it as a platform to lecture the audience. I don't inject my personal politics into every scene. I serve the story, the character, the craft. That's my responsibility. But art is political, Joy argues. It always has been. Art can reflect politics, Hopkins corrects. It can explore political themes, examine power structures, question authority. But that's different from being a political tool. When art becomes purely utilitarian, when it exists only to push a message, it stops being art and becomes propaganda. And I don't do propaganda. Joy looks at him searchingly. So you've never chosen a role because of its message? Because of what it says about society? I've chosen roles that challenge me as an actor, Hopkins says. Roles that push me into uncomfortable territory, that force me to find humanity in darkness, or darkness in humanity. If those explorations happen to resonate with audiences on a political level, that's their interpretation. But I'm not setting out to teach anyone anything. I'm setting out to reveal something true about human nature. And you don't think that's a message? Joy presses, Hopkins pauses, then nods slowly. Perhaps, but it's not a prescription. It's not a directive. It's an invitation to think, to feel, to question. That's the difference. You tell people what to think. I show them possibilities and let them draw their own conclusions. Joy lets out a frustrated sigh. You make it sound like I'm some kind of propagandist. I'm having conversations. I'm exploring issues. I'm giving voice to perspectives that might not otherwise be heard. Perspectives that align with your own, Hopkins points out. When was the last time you had someone on this show who genuinely challenged your worldview? Not someone you brought on to mock or debate into submission, but someone whose ideas you actually sat with and considered. The question hangs there, and Joy doesn't have a ready answer. Her mouth opens, closes, opens again. Finally, she says, I engage with different viewpoints all the time. Engaging isn't the same as listening, Hopkins says quietly. Engaging is performative. It's theater. Listening requires humility, the admission that you might be wrong, that your understanding might be incomplete. And that's terrifying for someone whose entire career is built on projecting certainty. Joy looks genuinely affected by this, her defensiveness cracking slightly. You think I'm not capable of humility? I think your job makes it nearly impossible, Hopkins says, and there's something almost sympathetic in his tone now. You're rewarded for confidence, for strong opinions, for never backing down. Doubt doesn't get ratings. Nuance doesn't go viral. So you've trained yourself out of the very qualities that would make you more effective at what you claim you want to do. There's a long silence. The studio audience is watching this like it's the most gripping drama they've ever witnessed, which in many ways it is. Joy is staring at Hopkins with an expression that's difficult to read. Anger and confusion, and something else. Something that might be recognition. Finally, she speaks, her voice quieter than it's been this entire interview. So what should I do differently? Hopkins leans forward slightly. Stop being so certain. Stop dividing the world into heroes and villains. Stop using your platform as a weapon. Start using it as a mirror. Show people the complexity of issues instead of reducing everything to talking points. Trust your audience to be intelligent enough to think for themselves instead of needing you to think for them. Joy nods slowly, though whether she's agreeing or just acknowledging his words is unclear. And if I did that, if I took your advice, would you respect what I do more? Hopkins smiles, a genuine smile this time. Respect isn't about agreement, Joy. I can respect your dedication, your work ethic, your passion, without respecting your methods or conclusions. But yes, if you approached your work with more intellectual honesty, with more genuine curiosity instead of predetermined outcomes, I'd respect it more. Most people would. Joy takes a breath, seeming to gather herself. She looks directly into the camera, then back at Hopkins. This has been, without question, the most challenging interview I've ever conducted. Good, Hopkins says simply. Challenge is where growth happens. Comfort is where stagnation sets in. I'm not sure I agree with everything you've said, Joy admits. I'd be worried if you did, Hopkins responds. The point wasn't to make you agree. The point was to make you think. Joy manages a small, somewhat rueful smile. Mission accomplished then. She turns to the camera, clearly ready to wrap up. We're going to take a break, and when we come back... Actually, Hopkins interrupts gently, I think this is where I should leave. We've said what needed to be said. Anything more would just be diluting it. He stands, and for a moment it looks like Joy might protest, but instead she stands as well. They look at each other for a long moment, and then Hopkins extends his hand. Joy takes it and they shake, a gesture of mutual respect despite everything that's just transpired. Hopkins turns and walks off the set, leaving Joy standing there, the cameras still rolling, capturing her complicated expression as she watches him go. The audience doesn't know whether to applaud or stay silent. A few tentative claps start, then grow. Then the whole studio is applauding, though whether they're applauding Hopkins or the sheer intensity of what they just witnessed is anyone's guess. So there you have it, one of the most explosive interviews in recent memory. A conversation that went from civil to volcanic in minutes, where nothing was off limits and no one held back. Make sure you subscribe to the channel and drop a comment below. What did you think about Hopkins's approach? Was he too harsh, or did Joy need to hear what he had to say? Let us know your thoughts.